Is the United States scrambling to bolster security in NATO nations after Russia's latest nuclear threat? Is Washington risking triggering Russia's fury by pushing ahead with new NATO nuclear deployment plans in Eastern Europe? Is the US turning to fresh nuclear deployments in more NATO states as it struggles in the Middle East conflict? The US is reportedly considering deploying nuclear weapons to additional NATO states, in a move aimed at bolstering deterrence and reassuring allies on the alliance's eastern flank. Washington is said to be exploring these deployments to calm European partners worried about planned reductions in US conventional forces stationed across the continent. This debate comes as the US shifts military resources toward Asia and other strategic regions, prompting concerns in Europe that their security may no longer be Washington's primary focus. Poland and several Baltic states have reportedly expressed interest in hosting US nuclear weapons on their territory, arguing that such deployments would significantly strengthen their security. Eastern NATO members justify these requests by pointing to what they describe as growing security threats from Russia, including its military posture and nuclear signaling near their borders. Reports indicate that more than 80,000 US troops were stationed across Europe during 2025, reflecting the still substantial American military footprint on the continent. However, the Pentagon recently canceled a planned rotation of about 4,000 troops into Poland, a move that has raised questions in Warsaw about future US commitments. Washington also announced the withdrawal of 5,000 US soldiers from Germany, further feeding allied concerns about a gradual thinning of American forces in core European states. Currently, 6 NATO members host US nuclear weapons and associated delivery aircraft, forming the backbone of the alliance's nuclear sharing arrangements. These host countries include Belgium, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Turkey and the United Kingdom, all of which integrate US nuclear capabilities into their national air forces. At the same time, Moscow continues to condemn NATO's military expansion and infrastructure buildup near Russian territory, describing it as a direct threat to its national security. Russian officials have repeatedly warned that any nation hosting what they call anti-Russian nuclear weapons could find itself designated as a priority target in a future conflict. On June 3, Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Sergey Ryabkov issued a direct nuclear warning, signaling that further US nuclear deployments in Europe could prompt a sharp Russian response. Sergey Ryabkov said, and I quote, "As regards us, those hypothetical extreme situations that may trigger the use of these weapons were outlined in detail in Russia's military doctrine and the fundamentals of Russia's state policy on nuclear deterrence. To put it somewhat straightforwardly, these documents send a signal that encroachments on Russia or its territorial integrity by aggressors, including those who may possess such weapons, could prompt us to use these weapons in the worst-case scenario." End quote. His warning came as Ukrainian drones struck both energy and military sites in St. Petersburg on June 3, linking the nuclear rhetoric directly to fresh attacks on Russian soil. The drone strikes landed just hours before Russia's flagship economic forum began, overshadowing the event and exposing vulnerabilities inside a showcase city. Several long-range drones crashed into oil facilities, with loud blasts heard across neighborhoods and plumes of smoke seen rising over the city. The governor of St. Petersburg said the Kirovsky and Krasnoselsky districts were among the areas targeted, confirming that key industrial zones were hit. Ukraine also reportedly struck near the Kronstadt naval base and a shipyard in the wider Leningrad region, extending the attack to critical military infrastructure. Video clips circulating online showed what appeared to be a Ukrainian drone hitting a Russian-guided missile ship, which then caught fire as flames spread across its deck. These strikes took place just about 10 miles from the economic forum venue where Putin is scheduled to speak on June 5, bringing the war perilously close to his stage. This was only the latest attack in a long string of tit-for-tat strikes between Ukraine and Russia, each round pushing both sides closer to a point of no return. The war has claimed more lives after another deadly incident struck Russian-controlled Crimea. Russian authorities said the strike left multiple casualties and triggered an emergency response in Simferopol. The announcement came directly from Crimea's Russian-installed leadership as details of the attack began to emerge. First responders rushed to the scene as officials worked to assess the damage and assist those affected. Sergey Aksyonov said, and I quote, "As a result of an enemy strike on non-residential buildings in Simferopol, 3 people were killed and 7 were wounded, according to preliminary reports. First responders are working on the site." Unquote. Moscow blamed Ukrainian forces for the strike and said non-military locations were among those affected. Ukraine has not responded to the accusations. while independent confirmation of the incident remains unavailable. A Ukrainian drone struck a passenger bus in the city of Yenikievo on June 3, according to initial reports from Russian-installed authorities in the area. The head of the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic said 7 civilians were killed in the strike, underscoring the human toll of attacks along contested front lines. Denis Pushilin added that 11 other passengers on board suffered injuries of varying severity, with some reportedly in critical condition after the explosion and ensuing fire. The bus was traveling on a long-distance route from Moscow to Simferopol in Crimea when it was hit, suggesting the attack occurred on a major transit corridor used by civilians. Videos and images from the scene showed the vehicle almost completely destroyed by the blaze, with only the charred frame and scattered debris left recognizable as a bus. Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova condemned the strike, describing it as a deliberate hunt for people and accusing Kiev of terror tactics against civilians. Russian media outlets alleged that Ukraine had carried out similar attacks on highways before, claiming a pattern of drone or missile strikes on civilian road traffic in Russian-controlled areas. Kiev, however, has repeatedly denied deliberately targeting civilians during the conflict, insisting that its drone and missile operations are aimed at military or logistical objectives. The incident came one day after large-scale Russian strikes on what Moscow described as military targets inside Ukraine on June 2, in a wider escalation of cross-border attacks. Those Russian strikes left at least 21 people dead and more than 100 injured in Ukraine, according to local authorities there, highlighting how both sides' operations are exacting a heavy civilian price. Kiev, Dnipro, and Kharkiv were among the cities targeted in a major overnight missile and drone barrage. Officials said the attacks damaged residential areas, commercial properties, and key infrastructure facilities. The city of Dnipro suffered some of the heaviest losses during the latest Russian assault. Missile and drone attacks in Dnipro left multiple people dead and several others wounded. Images emerging from the city showed shattered homes and buildings partially reduced to rubble. Rescue teams remained on the ground, searching damaged structures for possible survivors. The strikes came amid fresh Russian vows to retaliate for the recent attack in Starobilsk.